In this tutorial, I will show you how to make the summertime crochet dress. I used medium weight cotton yarn, a 4mm and 4.5mm hook, and some stitch markers. I'm starting by making the band of this dress. I'm attaching medium weight cotton yarn to my 4mm hook with a slip knot, and I'm chaining 11 chains. The length of the 11 chains will be the height of my band, so if you want a taller band, chain more. If you want a shorter band, make fewer chain stitches. Now I'm going to place one half double crochet into the second chain from my hook, and I'm placing that half double crochet into the back hump of the chain. I want to place one half double crochet into each of the remaining chain stitches, and at the end of my row I will have 10 half double crochets. Now I'm chaining one, turning my work, and I'm going to place one half double crochet in the back loop of each half double crochet stitch. At the end of this row, I'm chaining one, turning my work again, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to place one half double crochet stitch in the back loop of each half double crochet stitch from the previous row. And this is what my work looks like after 3 rows. You'll want to make a band long enough that will fit around your waist when it's stretched. Once your band is long enough, you'll be ready to join. I've changed to my 4.5mm hook. Hold the two ends together and place your hook in the 2 inner loops of the stitches from both sides. Now yarn over and pull through both loops on your hook. Again, place your hook in the 2 inner loops of the stitches, yarn over and pull through both loops on the hook. Do this until you get to the end of the band. Once I'm done joining, I will turn the band right side out, chain one, and I'm going to single crochet along the side of the band. There are no definite stitches, but you'll want to place about 3 single crochet stitches for every 2 rows of the band. Be sure to finish this row with an even number of stitches. We'll want to count the total number of single crochet stitches at the end of this row to find out where the middle stitch is, so we can mark off where we want the beginning of the triangle cutout to be. When you get to the end of the row, do not join. In this next part, we will be working in rows, not rounds. I have a total of 120 single crochet stitches around my band, so I'm taking my total number of stitches, dividing that by 2 to get 60. So my 60th and 61st stitches are my 2 middle stitches, and I will mark them with a stitch marker. I accidentally deleted the clip that has the band, but for all intents and purposes, let's pretend that this is my band with 1 row of single crochet stitches. The orange stitch markers in the middle are where I marked off my middle stitches, so the 60th and 61st stitches, and the blue stitch marker on the left is where I'm going to start one side of the triangle. It is 5 stitches over from the left middle stitch. Now I'm going to place another blue stitch marker 5 stitches away from the right middle stitch. The length between the 2 blue stitch markers will be the length of the base for the triangle cutout. So if I wanted to make the base of the triangle to be more narrow, I would place the blue stitch markers fewer than 5 stitches away from my middle stitches, so long as they are evenly spaced from the middle stitches. Here I have my last single crochet of the row marked with a blue stitch marker. I would recommend marking your last stitch so you know where to stop in your next row. After you've completed your first row of single crochets, chain 1, turn your work, and place 1 single crochet into each stitch until you get to your first stitch marker for the triangle cutout. Now I'm coming up to where I place my stitch marker to begin the triangle. So I'm going to place one single crochet up until that stitch marker, chain one, turn my work, and I'm going to place one single crochet into each stitch until the end of the row. When I single crochet into the last stitch, I'm going to chain one, turn my work again, and single crochet until I get to that stitch right before the triangle opening. I'm going to place 2 single crochet stitches in the last stitch of the row. I'm taking out my stitch marker because I don't need it anymore. I'm going to chain one, turn my work, and I'm going to single crochet until I get to the end of the row. I'm also taking out my stitch marker at the end of the row because I don't need that anymore either. Now I'm going to chain one, turn my work, and I'm going to place one single crochet into every stitch and 2 single crochet stitches in the last stitch. I'm coming up on the end of my row, so again, 1 single crochet into each stitch, and in the last stitch I'm going to put 2 single crochet stitches. Now I'm going to chain one, turn my work, and place 1 single crochet stitch into each stitch until the end of the row. At the end of my row, I'm going to chain one, turn my work, and place 1 single crochet stitch into each stitch except for the last one, and I'll put 2 single crochet stitches into that last stitch. Now because I skipped over 6 stitches for 1/2 of the triangle opening and we're increasing 1 stitch every 2 rows, I'm going to need a total of 12 rows to complete 1/2 of the triangle. So take the number of stitches that you skipped over, multiply that by 2, and that's the number of rows you need to complete for 1/2 of the triangle. Another way to think about it would be to have half as many stitches as you started with, so I started with 120 stitches, so that means that for half of the triangle I would want 60 stitches at the end of the row. This is what one side of my triangle will look like. Now I'm attaching my yarn to the back of my work, and I will single crochet over to the other opening for my triangle cutout. I'm going to place 1 single crochet in the stitch right before my marker, take out my marker, chain 1, turn my work, single crochet into the first stitch of the row and every stitch for the rest of the row. I'm coming up to the end of my row, so I'm going to place 1 single crochet into the last stitch. And this is what I have so far. I'm chaining 1, turning my work. I'm going to place 1 single crochet into the first stitch and every stitch for the rest of the row except for the last stitch, and I will place 2 single crochets into the last stitch of the row. So there are my 2 stitches for the last stitch of the row. I'm chaining 1, turning my work, and placing 1 single crochet into the first stitch and every stitch for the rest of the row. This will be the same as forming the first side of the triangle, so make sure that you have the same number of stitches on the last row for this side of the triangle as you do for the other. For me, that was 12 rows and 60 single crochet stitches on one side. And here we can see the triangle start to form in the front of the work. In the next row, I'm going to chain 1 single crochet into the first stitch and every stitch except for the last stitch of the row. When we get to the last stitch, we will join the 2 sides. To join the 2 sides, insert your hook into the last stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop. You should have 2 loops on your hook. Then place your hook into the first stitch on the other side, yarn over, pull up a loop, then yarn over and pull through all 3 loops on your hook. Continue to place 1 single crochet into every stitch for the rest of the row. I'm going to mark the middle stitch where we join the 2 sides, as we'll need to know where it is in the next few rounds. Now I'm going to find both sides of the dress. I'm going to find the stitch that's in between the orange stitch marker here in the middle and the first stitch, and the stitch that's in between the orange stitch marker and the last stitch. Here I have the side stitch markers marked off with a blue stitch. Next, I'm going to find the stitches in between the side stitch and the middle stitch. This is where we'll increase for the bust. They're marked off on the left with the 2 blue consecutively placed stitch markers, and on the right with the 2 consecutively placed orange stitch markers. Now I'm chaining 1, turning my work, and I'm going to place 1 single crochet into each stitch until I get to the consecutively placed stitch markers for the bust increase. This is the stitch marker that is helping me keep track of my side stitch, so I'm just going to take this out, single crochet, and put the stitch marker back in. Now I'm at the stitches that I marked for my bust increase, so I'm going to take these 2 stitch markers out, and into each stitch where I had the stitch marker, I'm going to place 2 single crochets. So there's the first 2 in the first stitch and 2 in the second stitch. Then I'm going to place 1 single crochet in each stitch until I get to the next consecutively placed stitch markers. Keep in mind that in the next few rows we are going to need to be able to identify where we placed the bust increases, so marking off the increases with a stitch marker may be useful. I didn't do that here, but it may be useful for you. The orange stitch marker is just keeping place of my middle stitch, so I'm just going to take that out, place 1 single crochet in that stitch, put the stitch marker back, and continue to single crochet until I reach what I marked off for the bust increases. I've reached the stitches for the increases, so I'm just going to take out the orange stitch markers, and I'm going to place 2 single crochets into each of those stitches. Now I'm just going to single crochet until I get to the end of this row. So there's 1 last single crochet in the last stitch. Now I'm chaining 1, turning my work, and I'm going to single crochet into each stitch until I reach the stitch right before the increases from the last row. This is the stitch marker that was on the side of my work. I took it out during this row because I didn't want to have to keep taking it out and putting it back in. I did count that this was on the 31st stitch of my row, so if you also don't want to keep taking one out and putting it back in on the side, then I would suggest just counting the number of stitches that it's in, and then at the very end you can put it back, because we will need to know where the side is. I'm coming up to the stitch right before my 2 increases, so I'm going to put 2 single crochet stitches into that stitch. Then I'm going to place 1 single crochet into each of the next 4 stitches. So there's my 4th stitch, and now I'm going to place 2 single crochet stitches into that next stitch. Continue to single crochet until you get to your other set of increases. I would encourage you to try on your piece as you make it. I had to do 5 rows of increases. You may need the 2 or somewhere in between, but just continue to try it on and make sure that it fits you comfortably around the largest size of your bust. I'm on my second set of increases now, so I'm going to place 2 single crochet stitches into this stitch, place 1 single crochet into each of the next 4 stitches, and then 2 single crochet stitches into the stitch after that. Then I'm going to single crochet into each stitch for the rest of the row. There's my last stitch of the row. I'm going to chain 1 and turn my work, and I'm going to single crochet into each stitch until I reach the increase from the previous row. I'm coming up to my increase from the previous row, and in the stitch right before it, I have it marked off with a stitch marker. I'm just going to place 2 single crochet stitches in that stitch. Then I'm taking out my stitch marker and I'm going to single crochet into the next 8 stitches. After those 8 stitches, I'm going to increase once more and I'm going to place 2 single crochet stitches into the next stitch. Now I'm going to place 1 single crochet into each stitch until I get to the other set of increases. Okay, so I have my other set of increases marked off with a stitch marker. I'm going to place 2 single crochet stitches in the stitch just before it. Now I'm taking out my marker and I'm going to place 1 single crochet into each of the next 8 stitches. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Now I'm going to place 2 single crochets into the next stitch. And I'm going to single crochet until I get to the end of the row. So I made 2 more rows of increases. Again, you might need a different number. I would just suggest trying it on and making sure that it fits you comfortably around the largest size of your bust. This is what I have so far. For the next part of the dress, I'm going to continue to chain 1 and turn my work at the end of every row. Then I'm going to place 1 single crochet into each stitch of the row. Keep in mind that after this section we'll add some rows of decrease to get the neckline shape, and the number of decrease rows will be about the same as your number of increase rows. So I had 5 rows of increase and I made 6 rows of decrease. During this part where I'm not increasing or decreasing, I made 23 rows. That was the amount that I needed to cover everything that I wanted covered. So if you want something lower cut, you can make fewer rows in this section, and if you want more coverage, you can make more rows in this section. At the end of this section, I'm cutting off my yarn and fastening off my work, and then I will sew the back of the dress together. Before I start sewing up the back, I'm counting up 8 rows on both sides and securing the sides together with a stitch marker. I'm going to do this every 8 rows to keep the rows lined up as I sew the back together. I'm joining my two sides by using yarn and a tapestry needle, and I'm making sure that I take out my stitch marker as I sew up the sides. I'm fastening off by sticking my hook in any loop I can find and making 2 chains. This will help keep it secure. Once you turn your piece right side out, you'll want to find your 2 side stitches that you originally marked. For me, that was my 31st stitch on either side. I have them marked here with orange stitch markers. Now I'm going to attach my yarn to the 31st stitch with a slip stitch, and make sure that this row is going the opposite way as the previous row to keep the pattern consistent, because you'll be able to tell if there are 2 rows going the same way. After I join with the slip stitch, I'm going to make 1 single crochet into each stitch until I get to the other side where the next stitch marker is. The orange stitch marker is placed in the 31st stitch counted from the other side, and I'm going to place 1 slip stitch into this side stitch. Now I'm turning my work and I'm going to place 1 decrease stitch in the first 2 single crochet stitches. So skip over the first slip stitch and place your hook into the first single crochet stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, so you have 2 loops on your hook. Now place your hook into the next stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, so you have 3 loops on your hook, then yarn over and pull through all 3 loops on your hook. Continue to place 1 single crochet into each single crochet stitch for the rest of the row. Now I'm coming up on the end of my row, so I'm going to turn my work, and in the decrease row we will not chain 1. Instead, I'm going to place my hook into the first stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, then place my hook in the second stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, then yarn over and pull through all 3 loops. I'm going to continue to place 1 single crochet into each stitch for the rest of the row. I'm at the end of my row. Now I'm going to turn my work, skip over that first stitch, and I'm going to place a decrease in the next 2 stitches. Now I'm going to place 1 single crochet in each stitch until the end of the row. I'm going to continue to make decrease rows as follows. In one row, I'll place a decrease in the first 2 stitches of the row and single crochet for the rest of the row. In the next row, I'll skip the first stitch and place 1 decrease over the next 2 stitches. I'm going to do this until the top covers most of my chest. Keep in mind we'll be adding a few more rows after this part. I added 8, but you may need a different number depending on the amount of coverage you want. Here's what I have so far for the top. You can see the triangle cutout and where I increased for my chest. In this next part, I'm going to make the small V shape in the neckline. I'm going to do a decrease in my first 2 stitches, so without skipping any stitches, just a decrease in the first 2. And then I'm going to continue to place single crochets until I get to the middle stitch. So now I'm coming up to the end of the row. I'm going to take out my stitch marker and place 1 single crochet into that stitch. I'm going to continue by turning my work and placing a decrease in the first 2 stitches of the row. Now I'm going to single crochet until I get to the end of the row. So there's my last stitch of the row. Now I'm going to turn my work, skip the first stitch, and place a decrease in the next 2 stitches. Now I'm going to single crochet into each stitch for the rest of the row. At the end of my row, I'm going to turn my work, and I want to place 1 decrease in the first 2 stitches, and then 1 single crochet in each stitch for the rest of the row. So just like we did in the last section, go ahead and continue to place decrease rows of single crochet. I made 7 here, and in the last row I placed a slip stitch in the last 2 stitches just to round out the neckline a bit more. Now I'm chaining 1 and fastening off. Now to continue the other side of the top, I'm going to take out my remaining middle stitch marker, attach my yarn with a slip stitch, and place 1 single crochet into each stitch until I get to the side. Now I'm turning my work, and I'm going to place 1 decrease in the first 2 stitches. Now I'm going to place 1 single crochet into each stitch for the rest of the row. After this row, continue to make decrease rows like you did on the other side. Again, I had 7 decrease rows. Once you're finished with your decrease rows, this is what the top of the dress will look like. I didn't fasten off after the last row. Instead, I'm just going to keep making single crochets all around the edge of the top of the dress. So I'm going to crochet down the side, single crochet down the sides, and then I'm going to make my way down to the back of the dress. Now that I'm at the back of the dress, I'm going to place 1 single crochet in each stitch all the way across until I get to the other side. Then I'm going to single crochet up the other side, and I'll meet you in the middle of the 2 cups. To get a little bit of a deeper V shape in front, I'm going to place my hook behind the post of the middle single crochet and slip stitch. Now I'm going to continue to single crochet to the beginning of my round, and when I get there I'm going to fasten off. Next, I'm going to make the straps. I'm attaching the yarn closer to the side of the dress and where I want the straps to be. I would suggest trying it on to get the best fit for where your straps should go. I'm attaching with a slip stitch and then I'm chaining 40. I did switch to a 5mm hook. If you don't want to use a larger hook size, I would suggest chaining a little looser than you normally crochet. Now I've switched back to my 4.5mm hook, and I'm going to place one single crochet in the back hump of the second stitch. And I'm going to do that until I get to the beginning of the chain. I'm coming up to the end of my chain. When I'm done, I'm going to place one slip stitch on the dress itself, and then I'm going to chain one and fasten off. Once you're done with this first strap, do the same thing on the other side. Make sure you space them evenly, and also be sure to use the same number of chains for both straps. Now that I have both straps made, I'm going to attach them to the back. I would suggest trying the dress on to see where you can get the best placement for the straps. I found that the best placement for me was 10 stitches in from the middle, and make sure that the strap isn't twisted before you mark it off. Now I'm just placing the stitch marker in the stitch that I'm going to attach it to and through the end of the strap. Then I'm going to do the same thing for the other strap. Now I'm just going to clean up the edges of the top. I'm attaching my yarn with a slip stitch in the middle of the back, and I'm going to single crochet over to the first strap. Please ignore the fact that I switched hooks here. I was just experimenting, but I ended up ripping out these stitches and later doing the stitches with the same 4.5mm hook I used for most of the dress. Now I'm at the stitch right before my strap. I'm going to take out my stitch marker, and then I'm going to place one slip stitch in the stitch right before the strap. Now it's really important to make sure that the strap isn't twisted, so I'm just doing that right here, and then I'm going to place one slip stitch in the first stitch of the strap. Now continue to place one slip stitch in each stitch of the strap. In the last stitch of the strap, I'm going to place one slip stitch, and then in the next stitch on the dress, I'm going to slip stitch. I'm going to continue to place slip stitches across the top front of the dress until I get to the next strap. Now I'm coming up to the next strap. I'm going to place one slip stitch in the first stitch of the strap and one slip stitch in the remaining stitches of the strap. Now to attach the strap, I'm going to place one slip stitch in the dress and then continue to single crochet across to where I first attached the yarn in the middle of the back. Now I'm coming up to the end of the round. I usually skip one stitch before I join, and that prevents the last stitch from popping up a little higher than the other stitches. I'm going to join with a slip stitch and then chain one and fasten off. Now I'm attaching my yarn with a slip stitch to the side of the dress. This will be under my arm, and I'm going to single crochet into each stitch until I get to the strap. Now I'm coming up to the strap. I'm going to place one slip stitch in the stitch right before the strap, and then one slip stitch into each stitch of the strap of the dress. Again, please ignore the fact that I switched hooks here. I ended up using a 4.5mm hook for this entire part. I'm just going to continue to slip stitch along this strap. Once I've slip stitched my way along the strap, I'm going to place one slip stitch in the first stitch on the dress. After that first slip stitch, I'm going to slip stitch in every stitch down the cup. Now that I've made my way to the side, I'm going to place one single crochet in each stitch until I get to where I first joined my yarn. I'm going to join this round with a slip stitch to the first stitch, chain one, and then fasten off. I'm going to attach my yarn the same way on the other side at the bottom of the other armhole and repeat what I just did to clean up around the edge. Now I'm going to clean up the inner edges of the triangle. I'm attaching yarn to the middle of the base of the triangle, and I'm going to chain one and place one single crochet in each stitch until I get to the first corner. I've reached the first corner of the triangle, so I'm going to place one slip stitch in that corner, and then I'm going to continue to single crochet up the side until I get to the top corner. I'm going to place one slip stitch in the corner, and now I'm going to continue to single crochet down until I get to the next corner. I'm placing one slip stitch in the next corner, and now I'm going to single crochet until I get to the beginning single crochet stitch. This is what the cutout looks like so far. Now I'm placing one slip stitch in the first single crochet and one slip stitch in each stitch around. To finish this round, I'm going to place one slip stitch in the beginning stitch of the row. Now I'm going to chain one and fasten off my work. To begin the skirt part of the dress, I'm going to attach my yarn with a slip stitch in the middle of the back and single crochet around. Again, there are no definite stitches, but I'm going to place about 3 stitches for every 2 rows of the band. At the end of this round, I'm going to place one half double crochet in the first single crochet from the previous round. I recommend using a stitch marker in this first half double crochet to mark the first stitch of the round. Next, I'm going to place one half double crochet in the next 3 stitches, and in the stitch after that, I'm going to place 2 half double crochets. Then I'm going to place 1 half double crochet in each of the next 4 stitches, then 2 half double crochets in the next stitch. So the pattern repeat for this round will be 1 half double crochet in the next 4 stitches, then 2 half double crochets in the next stitch. This will be considered an increase round. At the end of this round, I'm going to continue to place 1 half double crochet into the first stitch from the previous round. Again, I would recommend you use a stitch marker. I'm not doing that here for some reason, but I would recommend it. And for this round, I'm just going to place 1 half double crochet into each stitch from the previous round. And the next 2 rounds will be just like this one. I'm just going to place 1 half double crochet into every stitch from the previous round. The next round will be an increase round. I'm going to place 1 half double crochet in the first stitch. Then I'm going to place 1 half double crochet in each of the next 4 stitches. Place my stitch marker back in the first stitch. After those 4 stitches, I'm going to place 2 half double crochets in the next stitch. The pattern repeat for this round will be as follows. I'm going to place 1 half double crochet in the next 5 stitches, and then 2 half double crochets in the next stitch. Then 1 half double crochet in each of the next 5 stitches, then 2 half double crochets in the next stitch all around. I'm coming up to the end here and I'm a couple stitches off. If you are also, don't worry about it. While not ideal, it won't make a big difference once the garment is finished. Now for the next 3 rounds, I'm going to place 1 half double crochet in every stitch. After that, I will do an increase round where I will have 1 half double crochet in the next 6 stitches, then 2 half double crochets in the next stitch, then 1 half double crochet in the next 6 stitches, and 2 half double crochets in the next stitch. Every increase round will be separated by 3 rounds of 1 half double crochet in each stitch. The next increase round will have 1 half double crochet in the next 7 stitches, then 2 half double crochets. The increase round after that will have 1 half double crochet in the next 8 stitches, then 2 half double crochets in the next stitch, and so on. I'm going to increase until the dress comfortably fits around the widest part of my hips, so I would encourage you to try on your garment to find out how many increase rounds you need to do. I did a total of 6 increase rounds. Once you finish increasing and the skirt is large enough to fit around the widest part of your hips, the rest of the dress will just be rounds of half double crochet. So after my last increase round, I'm going to place 1 half double crochet in each stitch from the previous round until the dress reaches my desired length. I made mine about knee length. Here's the finished product. Let me know if you have any questions, and thanks for watching.